Hello, thank you so much, Katie. And yes, I am Claire Shanahan, Executive Director of the Women's Prize Trust. I am not Kate Moss, best-selling author and co-founder of the Women's Prize. Kate has sadly come down with the lurgy and has no voice, but has typed me a message because as chair of the judging panel for Discoveries for the last 5 years, she's incredibly sad not to be here with you all. It's also really lovely because we have former judges. I see some more former Discoveries judges in the audience as well, which is lovely. We have got gorgeous colleagues from Audible, Curtis Brown and Curtis Brown Creative as well, without which the Discoveries programme would not happen. So I want to read this message from Kate, and then I will do introductions to my lovely ladies on my left. So, from Kate. Dear Disco Queens, one and all, as we call you, Discovery's alumna, I am so sorry not to be with you this evening to celebrate the amazing achievements of you all in our first 5 years together. Congratulations to you all for being here. It takes huge hard work, steadfast commitment, and great courage to start a novel, let alone to finish and publish one. So I salute you all, wherever on the journey you are. The key thing in any writing career is to be true to your vision, to keep going even when inspiration is thin on the ground, and to keep editing and refining your material until you know that you have done your best. Never lose the joy of writing, and never confuse what happens to the novel once it leaves your hands with the satisfaction you had whilst writing it. The quality of the text is in your hands and those of your mentors, agents, and editors. Remember, although there are lots of wonderful novels out there, only you can write your book. It is unique. Have a fabulous evening listening to two incredible writers, Dorothy and Irenosen, and have fun with each other. Your fellow writer, Kate. She's sad not to be here. So now I would like to introduce Dorothy and Irenosen. I would say welcome, but we're very much in your house because you are both published under Hachette, under the Headline and Dialogue imprints. These are two very brilliant authors who I'm lucky enough to have worked with. They have both been great friends to the Women's Prize. They've both judged the Women's Prize for Fiction and Discoveries. So they will be, here in some of your years. To talk specifics, and this is called Career Goals, this session, so here we go. Dorothy Koomson is an award-winning global best-selling author of 22 novels. 23, there you go. Already out of date. With over 2.5 million sales in the UK alone. 2023 marked Dorothy's 20th anniversary as a published author. And her most recent novel, Give Him to Me, is out now in paperback, published by Headline, as I said. One of the things I really love about Dorothy, and we will come on to this, is how she always, with Irenosen, is so supportive of other writers amongst what she is doing herself as an author. So one of the key things that she does is the Happy Author podcast. If you haven't listened to it, I would really recommend it. It's basically an opportunity to try and blow the industry open, kind of what we've been doing here today with you all, trying to show you a range of different perspectives and different insights about the industry from an author's point of view. So, Dorothy, thank you for being with us. We'll hold the applause. We'll do it after. Irenosen Okojie is a Nigerian-British author. Her debut novel, Butterfly Fish, won a Betty Trask Award. She was presented by Ben Okri at the London Short Story Festival as a dynamic writing talent to watch, and featured in ES magazine as one of London's new exciting authors. Her latest book, Kurandera, was called A Feast for the Senses by Diana Evans, and she is most recently the founder of the Black to the Future Festival, which is a multidisciplinary Afrofuturist festival. She's vice chair of the Royal Society of Literature. So we had the Society of Authors, and with lovely Sarah here talking contracts earlier. The Society of Literature is an amazing organisation also supporting writers. So would really encourage that you look them up too. So career goals, I think we have it here. I want to talk to you both about your careers and also the work that you do for others. So please join me in welcoming them. So we will have questions at the end, but first, I want to go right back to the beginning, ladies. Maybe we'll start with you, Dorothy, and I want to ask you about how you started. Am I right in thinking that you had another career before you became a writer?
Well, kind of, because I started writing when I was very young, like I was 13, and I read my first novel, and it was called There's a Thin Line Between Love and Hate. And it was set in America, and it was about this girl whose mum had left, and there was this new guy at her school, and I used to write a chapter every night and then pass it around my school friends the next morning, and because none of that stuff had happened to me before, so this whole write what you know, I knew none of that stuff. My parents were together forever, I didn't even look at boys, but I just had this whole world in my life, so I carried on writing short stories and books right up until I was published. But then I had another career as a journalist and editor for magazines, women's magazines mainly. So yeah, I did. I did and I didn't, if that makes sense.
And tell me then, what was tell us about the moment then that you decided you were going to take writing seriously and publish professionally?
Well, what's interesting is because I am from a very working class family, and we had books at the library, and the only way I had access to a lot of books was at the library because we couldn't afford to buy books. So I took it seriously, always took it seriously, always wanted to be published, but I didn't have the sort of like ability to just write a book and then send it off, and I had to have a full-time job. And it wasn't until my fourth book was published that I became a novelist full-time. I sort of flipped my career on its head. So up until that point, I was still working full-time because I have to pay my mortgage, and I was still getting on the train to London every day and writing on the train to London. So I always took it seriously, but I couldn't afford until the fourth novel to give up that, sort of finance. So a lot of people at the time, my peers, a lot of them could give up a full-time job because they had a husband. I did not have a husband. I do now, but at the point I didn't. So I lived on my own, and I had to support myself financially, which is a reality for a lot of people. And as over time, authors' wages have actually gone down. So now the average author earns something like $7,000 a year. So you're going to have two jobs, and that's something that's a reality for all of us. You're not going to be able to, lie on a chaise lounge all day writing and dictating your book. You have to write. So that's what I took it seriously always, but I couldn't afford to not do another job at the same time.
I think that's a really important note as well, that I think we might have this sort of romanticised idea of what even a book deal means, but very rarely does it mean that people give up a full-time job. And the sort of economics of how it works are really important to understand. Okay. Irenosen, you were working with writers and then decided to dabble yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always wrote, much like Dorothy. I was, there's a bit of an echo. But I wrote when I was young. I was always scribbling poems, like writing diaries, funny little observations of people, especially my older brother. He was like my arch nemesis. So I was always documenting my, our sort of adversary. So that was quite fun. I love to write, and I studied law at university. But I was really restless, and I got quite bored studying law because we did all the unsexy units then. We did contract law, constitutional law, tort law. So I was falling asleep in lectures and getting in trouble. But I was still writing. I was writing for different types of magazines. And then I quit law and did a degree in communication visual culture. And that kind of introduced me to different types of media units. And then eventually, through an now ex-boyfriend, I discovered this arts organisation called Apples and Snakes, because he had been doing the marketing for them at the time. So it's a performance poetry organisation, and they program live performance poetry around the country. I thought, this is really cool. You know, at the time it was really edgy, it was really interesting. So I got a job working for Apples and Snakes, a bit like an A&R music person, this is what I like to say, going around the country finding really interesting talents, bringing them into the fold and helping sort of develop their voices. But I was still writing myself at the time, and I basically signed up with Spread the Word, who were running this mentorship scheme for young writers, poets, playwrights, fiction writers, and you got paired with a mentor. And I was lucky enough to get paired with Donna Daly-Clark, who was doing really well at the time. And she's a writer from Montserrat, Black British woman, but Montserrat in origin. And I remember seeing the poster of her book in the Underground that summer. And I was carrying her book around that summer. And then when I applied for the mentorship, I got paired with her, which was just like serendipity. It was just phenomenal. So long story short, the short story I was working on for that initiative, through working with Donna, then became a novel. And, I kept writing and seeing her, meeting up with her regularly, having a black mentor as well. I felt seen, I felt supported. And it just grew and grew and grew. But she was very clever because she was sort of carrot stick. She would say, if you do, 10,000 words, let's talk about Agent Irenosen. And then I would go away and write away and then meet her. And she'd say, you're not quite ready. You're not quite there yet, but let's talk about residencies. And I'd go, I'll write another 10,000. So she was just very clever at getting me to keep writing until I finished a draft. And I was clever in keeping her as my mentor because it was only supposed to be for a year. Then it went on to be 5 years. So that really helped me, I think, in terms of developing my voice. So I was kind of in a really interesting position because I came up grassroots. I never got the big deal or anything like that. I really had to fight for my place. And, because I write sort of weird speculative fiction as well. So, we sent to all the big guys and everybody said no. Everybody said, your work is really strong, but we don't know how to market it. So luckily, independent publishing houses exist. And, Valerie Brands at Jacaranda Books, shout out to them. Incredible. They publish Black British voices and voices of colour. She took a chance on me and she sort of loved the stories and said, I really want to publish you. And that's how I got my first break. Yeah.
So there, in a couple of minutes, you've talked about two amazing women who you really obviously seem like have been part of your journey. Dorothy, do any women really stand out to you as being really crucial to your career?
Quite a few people have helped me along the way, and that's why I always try and help as many people as I can, because I know that it's really hard to get a leg up. If you don't know anybody in the industry, then it's really hard. So I can think back before my first book was published, and I used to have writing tips on my website. And because way back in 1895, when I was first published, I knew that the internet was going to be really important when it came to writing to books, basically. So I used to have on my website writing tips from authors. So this is the audacity of me back then. I used to write off to these big name writers and go, could you give me some writing tips, please? And I had all these people just going, okay, and then sending me, and I was like, wow, look at me. So I remember Joanne Harris wrote back, Jodie Pico, Meg Cabot, all of those people, they just wrote back these writing tips for this random woman's website, which was really helpful, I think, for me, as writing tips for me as well as for other people. Weirdly, my first agent, who was a woman, and I'm not still with her, and it didn't kind of go well, but she was actually very helpful in making me realise that I have to stand up for myself, and making me realise that no one is going to be as interested in my career as I am, and I have to make sure that I always advocate for myself. I can't allow myself to let anybody else take control of your career. So that's always been a thing in my head. the first person I was published by a small independent publisher, Piatkas. So Judy Piatkas, her and Gillian, who worked there, they took a chance on me. Jo Dickinson, as she is now, she wasn't Jo Dickinson then, she saw my third book, and I mean, I've been rejected by everybody in the Writers and Artists Yearbook twice. So that was my first book. And then when we were sending out my third book, load of rejections again. It was like, okay, so I've had 2 books published, so this is meant to get easier. It doesn't. And so Jo had taken over the imprint at Little Brown for a maternity leave cover. And so she was allowed to do whatever she liked because no one cared about women's fiction right then. So she took me on. She sort of gave me a really... she gave me a real chance, and that's where I ended up with the 2 posters and stuff like that, which was amazing. And then my current editor, Jen. I mean, I've had a whole load of people. My publicist, Emma, who I've been with for a long time now, she is a real support. We're really good friends, and so I have sort of like collected women along the way who have helped me, and I try and help other people in return. Do you know what I mean? Give it back, pay it forward, or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really clear. It sort of takes a village, and that might evolve, who the people are in it, etc. But that idea that whilst you do need to advocate for yourself and sort of, be thinking about your own career, take all the support that is available, So both of you have had really interesting rises in terms of like not linear, but looking at you and your careers, when you see you, tube posters and setting up festivals and things like that, people might assume that you're kind of establishment, like you've made it. But you said, Dorothy, like it doesn't ever get easier. And I suppose at the end of the day, you come back to a blank page, or, maybe the niggles and the doubts are kind of, they will resurface every now and again. What do you do to keep on going, to keep publishing? Irenosen, I know you write every day. I said to you, how are you doing, Irenosen? Are you writing? And she said, always. So how do you keep going?
I think it's just being hungry, really. I always have this fear that I'm going to lose my talent. And, people say when they read my work, there's a real sense of urgency in it. That's because I always feel like it could go away any day. I never take it for granted. And also, I have a really complicated family background. Like, there's lots of trauma, there's lots of love, but, there's lots of darkness there as well. And I always say, if I didn't write, I probably would have been a serial killer, because that trauma's got to go somewhere, hasn't it, So luckily for the world, I turned to writing instead. So there is something about the power of the imagination, and it is a really restorative place. But I also have always wanted to challenge myself. When I was growing up reading fiction, I loved fiction, but I never really saw myself reflected enough. I never saw, black characters reflected enough, except the few black British writers that were published and the few writers of color. There weren't many. So, I was really clear that I wanted to occupy that space, but also occupy it in a really different way. I wanted to write stuff that was very unexpected, very experimental, really bold, but, kind of worlds that you recognize, but at the same time you don't. And I was, my sort of literary ancestors who gave me permission were people, like Octavia Butler, like June Jordan, like Dorothy, funny enough, years back, which she knows, Bernardine Evaristo, Diana Evans, Yvette Edwards, all these incredible women writers, Margaret Atwood, who championed my work. Amazing. She really inspired me. So these women made me feel seen when I didn't feel seen. I've always considered myself a kind of literary outlier. So to get published, to be in this space is a really amazing and humbling thing as well, because it's something that I was dreaming of. It's not something I ever thought would happen, but you kind of keep going and you keep pushing and you keep getting your advocates. You keep, like Dorothy said, you keep finding those people, man or woman, really. I had male advocates as well. I have to give a shout out to Alex Wheatle, who died this year. He was incredible, and he was such a big advocate for me. He pitched me to J.K. Rowling's editor because J.K. Rowling's editor edited him, and at the time I was like, I can't believe he's done this. I mean, she said no, but it was just so lovely that he did that. But yeah, I think it's the hunger, and the hunger changes. The hunger that I had before I got published was unlike anything. It's like doing a first album. You put your whole life into it, then you get published, and it changes because there are expectations. You have marketing people and editors and agents who are expecting things. So now there's a pressure. Now that's changed. So you have this kind of different pressure that you have to sort of work to, but you also have to still keep finding the joy in it. So for me, it's a combination of wanting to leave behind a body of work that I'm really proud of, that I feel is really singular in the Black British landscape, and something that really I'm writing for the younger me. I'm writing for the younger Irenosen. So that's why I keep writing, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you. And Dorothy, so you were judging Discoveries this year. So I heard you talking to potential Discoveries entrants on the Curtis Brown webinar last week. It was last week, yes. And you talked a lot about, keeping going. So book 23, do you still find joy in it?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't do it if I didn't find joy, and I found absolute joy in it. You have to be very clear-eyed about it. It is my job. That's why I do it. People say, oh, why do you write? Because I need to pay my mortgage, And you have to be clear-eyed about it. But I love what I do. I am very fortunate. I have the best job in the world, and I get up to write. I love writing, and I'm very fortunate to have that. And I keep going, partly because I'm really bloody-minded and stubborn. So the amount of times people have said no to me, I'm like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to keep going, and you've all got to develop that sort of like, I am going to show you. So, and you're going to hear no a million trillion times as an author. It was bad back then when, like I say, in 1895 when I was being published, but now there are so many books being published, there is so much out there. So you have to keep going, you have to tell your story, find your voice, and, keep telling your story in the way that only you can. Because when I go to schools, I do an exercise where I pick out 3 different things from a bag, a place, an incident, and a character, and they all have to write a story from those 3 things. And every single time, every single person in that room writes a different story, and it's to show them that they have an individual voice. They will always, people can tell the same story in such different ways that you hang on to that. You've all got that talent. You're all here. You've got to hang on to it and remember it. And also, like I say, remember, you're going to be rejected at every single stage of your career. Even now, 23 books later, millions of books sold, published in 30 countries, and people still reject my work. And, bookshops still don't want to stock you or whatever. You've just got to remember it's part of the process. And it's really hard and it really hurts. But like I say, a lot of the time, I'll show you, and you keep going. So that's how you keep going. You keep going by loving what you do, but also wanting to make sure you have a goal you want to reach.
And it sounds like there's always a goal for you. Like both of you are always kind of moving and very focused on the next thing, on leaving legacy. Was there a moment that you felt, I have made this, or you took a moment to think, I've achieved something that I've wanted for a really long time? Because I think often we're on to the next thing in whatever it is, whether it's writing or creativity or career generally. We sort of often don't take stock now of, I've done that and I've wanted that for a really long time and that's great and I'm just going to enjoy it for a while. Is there a key moment in your career that you think, that was actually a really big deal for me?
Yeah, I can think of 2. I'd say when I got the MBE, that was a moment that came from nowhere. I still have no idea who nominated me for that, but that was a really lovely thing. And then I think when I won the Kane Prize for African Writing for Grace Jones, my short story, that was an amazing thing, because I had followed that prize for years, and I never thought my work would win something like that. I thought it was for more traditional stories. So to have, you know, a story that like mine, which was very left field, win it that year was actually really amazing. And and typically I won it the year of COVID, so I couldn't even go. There wasn't even like a proper ceremony. I thought, trust you, Irenosen, to win it the year that COVID happened. So I was just sat indoors with a cup of tea when it was announced. But yeah, it was still like a special moment, and yeah, something that I look back on like with pride.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, Dorothy?
Do you know what? There've been so many different. I mean, for me, the first time I walked into a shop and saw my book on the shelves, I'll never forget that moment. I mean, I've been going into bookshops. Don't think I'm weird. I've been going into bookshops and standing at the K on the shelves and going, I'm going to see my book there one day. I'm going to see my book there one day. And so the
It's
day
called manifesting now.
Yeah, exactly. It's just called weird back then. But that moment when I could do that, and I went up to Borders on Oxford Street, obviously doesn't exist anymore, and seeing my book there, I was like, my goodness. And I'm walking around going, that's my book. Seeing tube posters for the first time. I still haven't seen anybody reading one of my books, so still convinced my parents have got a whole load of them in their basement. But there's other things, like I've had so many emails from people who have said my book has helped them. There's one story of a woman who, well, she was a young woman, who had come over to England from Europe, and she'd been assaulted just before she came, and so she came here, and she came to London, and she was really, really traumatized. And she said she was so scared all the time, she decided she was going to go home and take her own life. And she'd gone to Oxford Street and had found Marshmallows for Breakfast, one of my books, and she took it back to her hostel, and she said she read the book and realised she didn't want to die. She just wanted somebody to help her. So she went home and told a teacher what happened. That teacher helped her tell her parents, and she'd emailed me to say thank you, because it was just that moment where she'd found that book. And that's something that, you know, that's more than amazing to hear from somebody that you've helped them with something that you've written. That, I mean, I didn't even think that would be possible when I wrote that book. So yeah, and you know, getting prizes, but there's so many different parts, and that's the thing. When you said about enjoying the process, I often forget to enjoy and to look back and go, wow, look at that. You know, I mean, my dream is to go into a bookshop and see a Dorothy Koomson shelf. And it never happens, because they never have more than 5 of my books. But, you know, but it's that moment of, like, I forget sometimes that I need to sort of, like, go back and go, wow, look, I did that. Yeah. Because I'm always like, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So I try, especially nowadays, I try and enjoy all parts of the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important wherever you're at, and we're often chasing the next thing, but yeah, trying to enjoy it and appreciate where you've got to in it and feel proud of that. I wanted to talk a bit about the industry, and both of you are really well connected within the industry. You know, you do a lot via the Royal Society of Literature, Irenosen, and Dorothy, you know, you do so much work kind of talking and advocating for new writers. You mentioned earlier, Dorothy, that things have got harder for new writers. Can you dig into that a bit more? What do you mean for that? And be mindful of your audience, Dorothy. You know, we don't want all doom and gloom here.
I think people want the reality of it, because, as I said, it's a fantastic industry, but it has a lot of issues, and it has a lot of issues not just with diversity, but it has a lot of issues. I mean, diversity on all levels. Because when I say diversity as a black woman, people think I mean they don't publish enough black authors. I mean they don't publish enough black authors, they don't publish enough authors of colour, they don't publish enough working class people. And it's because the industry is very weighted towards middle class white women, basically. And I'm not being disrespectful to anybody, but that's how the industry is set up at the moment. And there are people who spend a lot of time trying to change that. And you have to be mindful of it. You know, when I was trying to get published for the first time, the amount of rejection letters I got saying, oh, we can't relate to it, but you can relate to people living on the moon, but you can't relate to a black woman who lives in London, you know, or it's about a black woman, but it's not about the black experience. Again, what's that? You know, that is that, and it hasn't got better. It sort of changes and it goes through cycles. And obviously in 2020, we had the come to Jesus moment where everyone was like, oh yeah, we love black authors and we want to publish black authors. And I was sat there going, I'm sorry, what? And that's why I wrote my open letter, because I wasn't having this with people, my experience and other people's experiences. You know, other authors been told that, oh, they can't publish their book because it has black people eating spaghetti bolognese, and you don't eat spaghetti. Black people don't eat spaghetti bolognese. It's like, are you joking? But it has got harder in the sense that you have to jump through so many hoops. There are so many, because there's so much being published, and so a lot of it is celebrity stuff, and you know that's a issue in the publishing, I think, and you know, we have to be cognizant of that. But also, the people who are publishing the books and who are agenting the books, they're always looking for people who are like them. And it's very hard for them to take that leap and to go outside of it. Having said all that, there are so many people out there who are trying to change that. And things like Discoveries, that's a leg up. It's a real help to kind of get you to that next level, to beyond that barrier, beyond that gate that's been kept by certain people. Things do change, and they are changing. It is harder just because there are so many people trying to do this thing out there, and I'm not going to sort of like sugarcoat it. There are so many people using AI to get ahead, even though they don't realise it's not the way forward. You know, as I said, you have your voice, you need to use it, and you need to keep using it. You have to keep going. You can't let the industry stop you from telling your story. You know, you might not sell 10 million books, but even if you get a publishing deal with a small publisher who will sell 1,000 books, that is your voice out there. And there is somebody out there who wants your story, who needs your story. So, yeah, I'm very kind of about the publishing industry, but I'm also, because I love being there and I'm part of it, and I want other people to get involved in it. And you know, the more of us lot, you lot, who get in there, the better it's going to be, the better the industry is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Irenosen, what do you think has changed? Because you've also, of course, done the writer development side with Spread the Word, and then you do lots of teaching, lots of work supporting new writers. What changes have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been change. I think there's definitely been an upsurge in writers of colour being published, for example. After George Floyd died, there was suddenly lots of interest in black voices and voices of colour, which is good. My thing, though, is actually supporting those writers, both at the start and mid-career level as well, because I feel like they publish these voices and then certain people drop off. So how do we support these voices in a way that feels like we're looking towards the future, you know, like we're looking towards ensuring that they have sustainable careers? Because if you don't get the big marketing budget behind your book, you know, that pushes it everywhere, you could also get dropped. I mean, that's happened to writers I know, and it's happened to writers of colour I know, sadly. And, you know, when that happens, it can be devastating. You kind of have to pick yourself back up again. So on the one hand, I think it's good. We've definitely seen some change. I still feel like in terms of, you know, the editors within publishing, those people who are the gatekeepers, those roles need to continue to be more inclusive, because, as Dorothy said, people often publish in terms of seeing themselves. So if we have more people of colour within those roles, then it's likely that we're going to have, you know, more inclusive stories. It's really interesting, though, because, you know, as a young black woman and as a young girl growing up in this country, I read so diversely. You know, the first book I picked up was Roald Dahl's Fantastic Mr. Fox. And if you read my writing, you can see his influence in there. You know, I loved his books. I thought I was Black Matilda, for God's sake, at boarding school. You know, I did not discriminate. You know, I read everything. I read everything from Roald Dahl to Jackie Collins to Mills and Boons. I'm not a literary martyr. I read everything because I think it's important to meet people where they're at, you know. And my thing is giving the space for writers to be able to flourish and thrive and create these initiatives like Discoveries, which is amazing. You know, you don't even have to pay to enter Discoveries. You know, so many initiatives you had to pay to do that. So I think to get that kind of support where, you know, you're being encouraged, you're kind of within this platform where women are doing incredible things, you get access to mentorship, to an agent, to, you know, feeling like it's possible, manifesting your book into existence, which is such a powerful thing. You know, that's what excites me. So it's changed, but like Dorothy, I'm also doing my bit as well to give back. I've mentored so many writers along the way. Lots of them I've seen go on to do really great things, which has been really rewarding. You know, I've judged so many prizes, as you know, Claire.
So much reading.
So much reading. But that's also a real privilege, you know, to kind of see the variety of voices out there. So I think it's changed. I still think there's more work to be done. I think it's an ongoing conversation. I don't think it's a conversation that ever drops off. And I have to say, it's everybody's responsibility. That's the thing. It's everyone's responsibility to champion women's voices. It's everyone's responsibility to be inclusive. You know, we can't have these separate infringements where people are doing different things but not supporting each other. We're all part of the same community, so we should all uplift each other. You know, that's how we make things happen. So yes, there's been change, but still work to be done, and we're all responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talked there about I can't remember the phrase you used, but sort of the sustainability of someone's career. And I think that's something we're really passionate about. When we were designing Discoveries, one of the things that I really care about is people talking about money and the economics and how it works. And I think people might think you do give up your job when you get a book deal and things like that. And I've known from so many author friends that so often isn't the case. So I'm really glad that we have this practical strand running through Discoveries where we will, of course, work with you on your craft, on trying to finish your book if you haven't finished it already, but also trying to teach you about the industry and explain it and explain what it means, but also to give you those tools to advocate for yourself. And part of that is the economics, the business side of it. And being willing to talk about money, I think, is really important with the right people. So really arming yourself with kind of all that information, which is where the Society of Authors comes in and why I was so happy that Sarah joined us this afternoon. The other thing that I want to say is about Discoveries being a really integral part now of the Women's Prize Trust as a charity. So many of you will, of course, know the Women's Prize for Fiction for years. It is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. And it is, you know, the biggest celebration of female creativity in the world. We're incredibly proud of it. But Discoveries is really our first flagship program as a charity. So we became a charity in 2019. And what that really meant was we had this opportunity to solidify actually all the good work that we had been doing around the fringes of the prizes, but really articulating the challenges that women face as creators. There are, of course, lots of women publishing now. We know that. So women, you know, the percentage of women dominating fiction has absolutely risen. I would encourage you all to go and read the impact report on the 30th anniversary of the Women's Prize on the website if you haven't already. But we've grown that marketplace. We've been part of that, which is incredible. There isn't a shortage of women writing, and there certainly isn't a shortage of women reading, which is amazing. But in terms of how women's work is often treated, in how it's respected, reviewed, nominated for other prizes, and rewarded, which is crucial. There is a 36% gender pay gap for writers as opposed to the national average of 14 in this country. So whilst we're all here in this room and this is brilliant, there is still work to be done. And that for the Women's Prize is kind of why we keep on doing what we're doing, whether it's prizes and celebrating a particular book and giving that female author a platform to then go on and do other things, to sell rights, to negotiate a new deal, to get teaching opportunities, etc. And whether it's discoveries right at the start of someone's journey and thinking about what can we do to actually support them and give them a bit of inspiration or encouragement, community or tools, really, to finish it. So for us, that kind of is how it all fits together. And that's really important for us now as a charity. We've got some supporters in the room, and I just want to say thank you so much, as well as to our partners, because we can't do it, without you. So thank you. Now, I'm going to open up to questions soon, but first of all, I have a question for you. You've already given some tips, and I've heard, Dorothy, from you, resilience and advocating for yourself. What else would you tell this group of women here tonight? What are your tips for them?
Oh, you go.
Well, we've mentioned manifestation. I really believe in that, and it's something Bernardine Evaristo talks about a lot, who has also been a kind of on-off mentor to myself. Really thinking about your vision as an author, where you want your career to go, those goalposts, who you think could be an advocate, and trying to follow up with those people and getting them into your life and finding ways of getting them to support you. So I think that's really important. I think connecting to other voices who are at the stage you're at. So finding some sort of community as well, whether it's, a reading group, an emerging writers group. That way you feel seen and you feel supported. So I think those are the two things: manifestation, finding support. If possible, I would really recommend getting a mentor. The reason I say that is without that, I don't think I'd be where I am, because off the bat, I saw myself reflected and, it just felt like it was possible having that kind of one-to-one support. So if you can get a mentor, it's really helpful, because they will also kind of open the door for you and then connect you to other people who would then connect you to other people. So that sense of community starts to build. And then I think, just trying to find the joy in your work. That's really crucial. Writing is hard, as we've said. We talk about the romantic part of it, but it is hard. You do have to look at that blank page every day, and you've got to be joyful about it. You've got to be excited about it, So if you can find that sense of adventure and that sense of excitement for it, then, it's not a chore. And I think that that's really important, because that shows in the work. If you're bored by the writing, then that's going to show it in the actual work itself. I always look at writing as a process of investigation and curiosity. So my big tip, apart from the others, is to stay curious. If you stay curious about life, about stories, about the people around you, there's always something to say. There's always something to discover about the human experience, about being a woman and how you move through the world and how that evolves and changes, about identity. There's so much to mine. It's endless. So I think those things have really helped me in terms of, finding a way forward and, creating some sort of career out of it. Yeah.
And just a follow-up question on the mentor, do you think it's advantageous that that mentor is an author further along than you? Is that sort of your ideal person who's feeding back to you?
100%. To be practical, they have to be useful to you because, otherwise they can't really connect to you. And it's really helpful in terms of experience as well. They've been through everything that you're kind of looking forward to. They can advise you about the pitfalls, what to do, what not to do. You were talking about, the finance part of it and money management and all of that stuff, because nobody tells you how to do these things. You're kind of stumbling through it. So I've been really lucky in that sense that I've got women, that I can talk to, other women authors who've been in the game a long time, who I can just ring up and say, look, I'm in this position. what advice can you give me? And they're always really honest, and it just helps to demystify that process, because if you're new, it really does feel like a minefield. So I would definitely recommend somebody really established, if you can get that person who can kind of help you navigate.
Dorothy, you literally have a podcast to answer this question. I realise that.
I know, but there's some things that, like when I was talking about advocating for yourself, I wanted to add to that is really pick your battles. There's so much involved, and you have so many battles ahead of you, from the cover to your name even. My first publisher thought I should change my name because Dorothy was old-fashioned and Koomson was too complicated. I was like, I'm married to my name. And that was a red line. So, pick your battles. Have a red line of things that you are not going to compromise on. For me, I'm never going to have a book with just a white woman on the front, and I'm never going to have, there's stuff I will not do. I will not put racism in my book because it makes to sort of like have a white character be redeemable. If they're racist in my book, they're racist, and they're not getting redeemed. Do you know what I mean? Have your red lines, and then other things, just let them go. Sometimes I'll have a cover, and it's not the best cover in the world for me, but everyone in the publishing house loves it. And I'm just like, do you know what? Go with it. Or if it's green or pink, you choose, because it's not as important as other things. Realize that writing a book is not just a solitary. Getting the words down is, being published is not a solitary thing. You have to work with other people. So again, pick your battles, but also choose the people who you surround yourself wisely. Find people whose opinion you trust and go with that. Because the other thing that is a lot of authors are really shocked with for the first time is when you get negative feedback. You get people saying really mean things about your book, and you're like, but it's my book. I love my book. It's my child. How dare you say?
Do you mean readers or your team?
Readers and your team as well, I'll send my book into my editor now, and Jen, she's fantastic, but there's certain bits of the book she won't like, and I don't ever tell her this, but I'm like, how dare you? How dare you? But she's always right. But it's that moment of going, oh my God, how dare you? But because I trust her and I have a good relationship with her, I know that she's right and I'm wrong. Which is not, I won't say that often, I can tell you. Get yourself a group of people who you trust. Don't have to be other published writers, just other people who you can share the journey with, because it's important to have people around you who are going to help you. Recently, two of my friends, who we've all been published for quite a long time, we've started meeting up every month and just talking about what we're working on and giving each other the encouragement and goals. And it's actually transformed things a lot for me, because I've been doing a lot of it on my own, but now having people I can sort of like, who will absolutely Dorothy Koomson me, because I'm very good at telling other people what to do, but you know what? I don't want to listen. But when they tell it to me, I'm like, gosh, that's harsh, and that's a very Dorothy Koomson thing to say, but you know what? I'm going to take it on board. So you need people and be like that person for other people as well. Be supportive for other people. It's really important. Find out as much information as you can from other people. Enterprises, discoveries, but other prizes. Enter competitions as much as you can. Enjoy yourself, is what Irenosen was saying. Really enjoy yourself, because this is what, as they say, you get one journey around the sun, so you might as well enjoy every part of it. And if you're a writer, writing is the best thing in the world. The only thing it's almost as good as writing is reading. So those are the two things that I love most in the world. So, and you get to do it all the time. So do it, and enjoy it as well.
Thank you so much. Right, we've got about 5 minutes. If anyone from the audience has a question, hand up straight away. Have we got a roving mic? Rachel, over here? Yeah. Thanks, Ola.
Thank you so much. My question is for Irenosen. When you say get a mentor, what's a not annoying way of doing that?
That's such a great and practical question. Okay, so I'll tell you my brief story about how I got an unofficial mentor. I remember years ago, I went to a talk that Bernardine Evaristo was doing, and I had admired her from afar, you know. So I went to this talk, I really enjoyed what she did, and I went up to her afterwards and I said, I really think you're kick-ass. I love what you do. I'd love to have a coffee at some point if you're up for it. And she said, yes, absolutely. Why not? To my surprise. So there was a genuine interest in her. And I think she liked my enthusiasm. So, you know, we stayed in touch. And I asked her to do a workshop because at the time I was sort of working with young writers and running workshops. And she said, yes, she came to that workshop. And because everybody else was scared to submit work, I ended up, even though I was running it, I ended up submitting work. And she went through my work during this workshop and absolutely tore it to shreds, which was terrifying. But at the end of it, she came up to me afterwards. She said, I know I was really harsh on you, but you know, you have something special. Your voice is really different, and I'm going to keep my eye on you, so let's stay in touch. And that was how I kind of got her unofficially. And you know, she kept her eye on my career, and we would meet up for coffee every now and again. So yeah, I would recommend kind of approaching people who you're genuinely interested in, you know, kind of attending their events, chatting to them and just saying, would you be up, you know, for a coffee at some point? And that's quite a nice way of doing it because you do have that interest there. There are also development organizations like Spread the Word and the Literary Consultancy who can pair you up with mentors as well if you're kind of scared to go up to people and you find that quite daunting. So there are two different pathways in terms of doing it, but I highly recommend it because the benefits for me, oh my God, it made such a difference. You know, when I think about how much I've gained from having those people in my life, it really made a difference. And the other thing about that as well is it's always positive, even when they have, you know, guidance and advice. The upside of it is always positive, and you want to surround yourself with people who are positive and encouraging. You don't, even if they're not established voices, you don't want to be around, woe is me, oh, it's never going to happen, oh, it's really, really hard, because that's going to have an impact on you. So when you're around positive people and then people who have done it and done really well at it, you know, they're always going to be helping move you forward. So yeah, that's my big tip.
I know you didn't ask me the question, but a woman who I'd met at a couple of Black Girls Book Club events, I didn't actually remember meeting her. There was quite a few people, but she wrote to me and said that she had got financing from Literature Wales because she lived in Wales, and for mentorship, so would I consider being her mentor from that? I wouldn't have taken money from her, but that was the program, so she'd applied for it. So that's how I mentored her for 6 months. And she's doing amazing things, not because of me, I hasten to add, but it was really nice. It was a nice way. So there are things like that, sort of grants, local grants that you can look around for financing. So if you, like Irenosen said, an author you are genuinely interested in, you know, contact them and say, I've got this money, or would you consider doing, you know, talking to me for an hour and see if that, if, you know, that's a way of finding a mentor.
I often find that authors, no matter how established they are, if you write to them via their website or their agent, they will reply. I learned recently that Hilary Mantel had supported lots of writers and sort of had correspondence with lots of people and given them feedback on their manuscripts and things, even though she's, you know, super successful and established and, you know, rather busy, I would have imagined. So that was, you know, that made her go up even more in my estimation. So, yeah, I think ask and advocate for yourself. That's part of it, I suppose. Any other questions? We're almost out of time, but maybe one. Okay, one at the back here.
Hi, this is for Dorothy. Thank you for your talk. You're very charismatic. I'd like to ask if you think what do you think it is that makes great writing, and what will you be looking for when you're judging the prize?
I think what makes good writing is somebody who believes in what they're writing. You're not writing it because you want to win the prize or you want to make a lot of money, because good luck with that one. You actually believe in the story. You want to tell the story. As I said the other night, it's like this thing where you sit down in front of someone and say, I'm going to tell you a story, and you're not going to want to get up until I finish telling you that story. It's bringing that energy to whatever you write. And as I said the other night as well, I'm really looking for good writing and good storytelling. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, you can kill yourself trying to make something perfect, but they'll always have an editor or an agent who'll tell you this doesn't work or that doesn't work. So stop trying to kill yourself to make it perfect. But also, it doesn't matter what genre you're writing in. Just tell your story. Tell your story in whatever genre, commercial fiction, crime thriller, literary, whatever it is. Just find a way to tell your story in your way. And it's really obvious when someone is sort of like dialing it in. And that's why, you know, at the end of every single book I've written, it's almost like I've been through hell. I've walked through the fires of hell. And my husband looks at me and goes, I can see why I married you, because my hair's like this and my clothes are like that. I'm like this because I've put every single thing into that story. And that's what you need to do to make it a story that people want to tell, you don't want to read. You want to tell it and I want to read it. So I'm just looking for you on the page. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, your sort of your heart and soul and your blood in the book.
For the prizes, for the Women's Prize for Fiction and Non-Fiction, so we have 3 guiding tenets that we talk about with judges, and they have remained the same throughout the whole 30 years of the Women's Prize for Fiction and now Non-Fiction. They are 3 words: excellence, originality, and accessibility. Now, obviously, those 3 words are entirely subjective to each of us as individuals. Each judge, so there are 5 judges on a panel, each of the judges will prioritize them in a different order and they will mean different things to them. But ultimately, what you bring as a reader is really important to the Women's Prize. You won't hear us talking about the best books because writing is art and the best simply does not exist. It is entirely subjective and your response as a reader is 100% valid. On discoveries, we don't use those 3 words. We'll often talk about the promise and the potential over the polish. So things that come in might have typos in them. They may not be quite as great as you want them to be, as polished and as finished. But as Dorothy says, it's, do you want to read on? You only get to submit 10,000 words. And, you know, the judging panel sit there and they go, oh, what happened next? You know, I want to read it. And that hunger for more of that voice and not being able to let it go, I think, if it stays with you, I hear time and time again from judges, these are the things that really, really matter. And I think your voice will be true and memorable if it actually comes from you, from inside, rather than trying to write to trends or think about what's going to sell. I will get off my soapbox now. Right, ladies, I think we are almost out of time. I want to say a huge thank you to Dorothy and Irenosen for joining us. I would also like to say again a huge thank you to Hachette for hosting us. So we have drinks until 8:30. I'd particularly like to name check Maura, without whom none of this would have happened, Rachel, Neve and Becca, but also particularly the gorgeous Annabelle Wright, who has made today happen, ladies. Thank you so much for coming. It's been lovely spending the day with you and we hope to get to do it again soon. So enjoy.
Thank you.